Okay, welcome everyone to our housing retreat on April 9th. And we're gonna do a roll call.
Yes, indeed. Devorah Leonard.
Here.
Shu.
Here.
Samari.
Here.
We are expecting Stephanie Pierce. Carmen Brown will not be attending. Solicitor Amy Blankenship. Assistant Village Manager Elise Chardulo and Village Manager Johnny Burns.
Great. I just want to say thank you everybody for making the time and effort. I know it is not a small amount of either to be here today. I thought we'd just start with a quick round of check-ins if anybody wanted to either just say something that we said to discuss today, or I thought it'd be nice to share a quick anecdote if anybody has something related to housing in the village. For example, my manager, is a young person, grew up here, works here, and just moved into a new little house from her previous apartment. So it's really fun to see that movement for somebody in their 20s to kind of move into the next phase of her life and where she lives.
Excited to be here today, excited to get into the topics, and thank you all for being here.
We're here. I didn't plan anything. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Here, present, feel good, looking forward to this, looking forward to learning a lot more. I would be the first to put out that this is not a subject matter that I have the most depth in. I'm really interested and always been interested in it, so I'm looking forward to identifying what we can and can't take on and how we can affect change.
So we as a firm do a lot of presentations around the state on housing and helping communities develop housing. And my component of that is always zoning, to talk about changes that can be made to zoning codes to allow for more housing infill development. And I use Yellow Springs as an example all the time because we have a pocket neighborhood because we allow ADUs. Hey, Stephanie.
Hi.
So, yeah, and then I always get a lot of questions about it too. A lot of people are aware of the pocket neighborhood. People that, I don't know how, it must come up on Google when you look that up in Ohio, but people are very aware of it.
I was early.
You're good. We'll come back to you. We're just checking in.
I think this has been a long time coming. And while it's been a primary goal for councils for many, many years, I think the one thing that's never happened is a sit down, hash it out, get on the same page, figure out how we want to move forward thing. And I think it's why the ball has been fumbled for the last 15 years that I'm aware of. So I think this is a really good thing.
That'll be the first football metaphor of the day.
Just getting her set up.
That's right.
We can tally it over here.
Cool. Morning, y'all. Yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. I'm really hoping we can make some actionable plans. So I'm looking forward to having some conversation that leads to clarifying what we want to do and then doing it. I feel like you kind of got us with the anecdote. Like, I'm trying to think if I can meet you there somehow. I don't know that I have a housing anecdote. So I'm going to think on that and maybe throw one in later.
Stephanie, we're just checking in how you're feeling today, or if you had like a positive anecdote about housing in the village. Either or. I was just given options.
Yes, I mean, I'm just, happy that we're talking about it, and I'm sure that, in general, the public, I'm sure probably is as well, so.
Great. Okay, so this next section, to Judy's point, is to try to get us more on the same page, especially with the three of us who have not been in conversations on the council and village level in these past years. So, we talked about different ways to do it, and I think in the end it's really letting people who have been here and involved share. So we wanted to just limit this to 30 minutes, so that's why with the four of you, 7 minutes each. I think we have a little more flexibility now with the time. So there's not too much more to prompt besides, I think, having the mindset of, these guiding questions. What's been successful? What do you think contributed to the success? What's been difficult about the past? And what do we want to keep in mind moving forward on these new efforts? Does anyone want to kick it off? It's a football metaphor.
Oh, two,
Two.
okay, I am gonna start keeping track.
Well,
Never done that before.
That should get 2 points for that coming from Angie. It should.
Okay. Well, I don't know, let's start off with A, just, because there certainly have been successes. I mean, in no particular order, it was before my time, but it seems like Lawson Place's success in that there was housing, there was a concern that it was affordable to low-income people, that it would leave the market in that form, and then the village was able to help secure that and maintain affordable units. So I think that's a success. People who were here before me might have a different perspective on it. My understanding, what was pitched to me, is that it was also essentially an investment opportunity, and that we were, sort of diversifying our assets of investments, and one of them was to maintain, sort of build equity in the property. And I don't know how that's gone entirely, but assuming that the property value has gone with all of the other property values, it's probably been a pretty good investment too. So anyway, I'm just getting things going.
So on A, on Gavin's point, Lawson Place is now a success. But it's also a burden at the very beginning, because we did take an old building, it was not in great shape. We have invested a lot of money into it. We now have 16 rented units. But one thing that I can say on the backside that nobody understood with the investment, and, well, some of us did. A lot of the front people did not understand what the investment, the burden that come with Lawson Place on a daily, all the way down to collecting rents, evictions, snow plowing, lawn mowing. I mean, we added more work to the staff, but we didn't add staff to the work. So overall, it's in good shape now, but it's been a long haul to get there. Some of us have spent Christmas holidays when the boilers went out buying heaters and trying to make sure, because we couldn't get the heater fixed right away. So yeah, emergencies happen. They're fewer and far between now, but it come on a price of a lot of staff members and taking on responsibilities that we didn't anticipate.
And it's very uncharted waters for a municipality to own an apartment complex like that.
And let me back up. Some of that is intentional on staff's part, some of the burden. Because if you own an apartment building, and you have a third party, or you own a rental and you have a third party maintain it, the village, for that instance, Lawson Place has to call a third party. Well, we're still the ones getting the complaints, and we're the ones getting it on Facebook. You're not taking care of it, but it's a third party supposed to maintain it. So that is where I think we have stepped up in a way, because they call here and we're literally making sure that it's getting done. And we've not had it, we've got close to the eviction, but we've never had to evict anybody. So some of that burden is to try to keep it in-house and not have to use a third party, because we're maintaining it.
And the cost-saving aspect of that too.
Correct. Big cost.
Big
Yeah,
cost.
really big.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that goes to the affordability of it, saving that cost.
Okay, another one. These are things I'm not like, I'm just trying to get us going. Obviously, we talk about the stepping in of the utilities at the glass farm. So combination of new development, then utilities coming in. We have opportunities that are set up that weren't there before. So that seems like a success.
I agree with you, and again, thinking outside the box, that was
Yeah.
done. But it's been a slow process because you just don't have a bunch of money to throw at infrastructure, but if you're making plans for other things and you can incorporate it, that's been a success. And we've done the same thing with some other properties, at the other end of town. When we get it, we started cleaning it up, so that's a success. Difficult is trying to keep up with it. As far as you hear a plan and then all of a sudden you start going for that plan and then all of a sudden gears get changed and you've spent years doing it this way and for this purpose, and then a new council gets seated and a new ideal comes through the door, and then everybody shifts focus, and we lost focus on what we was really aiming for. I mean, the glass farmer, and I've only been here for 12, Judy's been here for 15. But it's been a topic for 30 years as far as I can tell, if not longer. So to see the glass farm where it's at today, I'm like, holy crap, we've made leaps and bounds, but still there's nothing vertical.
Yeah.
So then.
Solar
nobody-
panels.
You're correct, and yes. But seeing something vertical will be a success for a lot of the village. And that's when you can see the success. We see it at the level we're at now because we know what's under the ground. But the public and the villagers don't see success because it's not vertical. And we're gonna be fought the full way. I can,
Yeah.
It didn't get built because, people disagreed with it back in the past and they didn't want it. And then they wanted it, now they don't want it. So, again, like Judy says, this is a sit-down moment for all of us to get on the same page and make sure that we're going the same direction. So, that's success.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been difficult, and I hope that others of you at least will like ask questions or talk. I don't know. It's just Johnny and I. This is gonna be weird.
This was your guys' moment to shine, though.
I know. I
This
guess
was-
so. I guess so. I mean, for all the talking that has happened about housing, especially in the public sphere, it's really interesting. Like this last round when y'all all ran. As I recall, all 6 people running, when asked their top 3 priorities at the council forum, had housing in some form, and I think everyone was either saying something about affordable housing and or workforce housing, which I assume is just sort of definitions, but in the same realm. So for all the talk about it, the amount of clarity of goals and purpose, I think, has been pretty limited. And I don't know. I always come back to and it was helpful to have it's always helpful / scary to look over the McKee, cost of living study stuff. But it's like from everything I could tell, this has been a topic of conversation for 40 plus years. And when you think about, and this is good, we could get to the success around the prospect of the Windsor project with the multi-family apartment building. But just that we've gone decades without clearly showing the vertical progress in some ways. It's really kind of wild. So anyway, I hope that we both feel a sense of urgency to try to change that, but that we also, none of us were here. It sounds like the longest is Judy 15 years ago. And so I don't know, I feel like we don't have to, I don't know, we have to deal with what's happened in the past, but it's not us that got us here, you know? So let's change course.
I think the lessons that we've learned from the past, and it's gonna be in the future, we just gotta figure out how to navigate is no matter what we do, anywhere in the village, there's always the negative people that's gonna, they'll be the ones to show up. It's not gonna be the people that are for the projects, because they're afraid of the people that are negative against the projects, and it doesn't matter if it's pickleball to housing at this point in time. So we have to have the game plan of, this is the plan, and we know what we're doing. So the lessons learned is staying focused and not listening to negative. If this is truly something that we all want to do and the village wants us to do, then we should stay focused and not waver one way or another, stay firm with the decision and put timelines to it.
And I know you know this, but just if the AI machines that are gonna summarize this meeting
Yes.
are factoring in, that you're not saying don't listen. It's like, we wanna listen and factor in. The way I've been kind of thinking in my head is like, how do we move forward with things that have like strong support? You know, like, and I think there's a lot we could do that would have strong support, and even strong support, where's that line, you know? There very, very well maybe 30% of people that would prefer not to do a thing. Does that mean that you don't do a thing? So anyway, I'm just saying, I know you
Yeah.
know, I think sometimes the nuance gets lost of like, just because we want to set a path where we're listening, where we're conscientious of different opinions, and then, but then at some point, hey, we're doing this thing, there's gonna be some disagreement. We would like everyone to be on the same page. It's very hard to get there, that's okay.
Well, go ahead.
I agree with you that we should listen, right? But we have to outweigh we have to really pay attention to what we're listening to, right? The prime example, you know, everybody don't have a problem until it's in their backyard, right? And the prime example that I have is phase one of Springs Meadow come, and a resident moved from Cincinnati to here, and then stood up and was trying to stop phase two because too much of a good thing is too much, and they wanted to stop phase one or stop phase two. And I'm thinking, but you just got your piece of the pie that you really love, and now you don't want to share it with anybody else. So that's what we have to really watch and stay focused on. Man, we have this area or we have this goal to make sure that we get it across the finish line.
Well, and I think the other thing that hasn't happened previously, or at least not in a very aligned way, is, you know, Gavin's brought up strategic plan and that needs to get put together. There's a lot of focus on finance and budgeting and how are we doing things in a responsible manner, because those are the things that'll knock housing out of the picture if it's not all carefully coordinated, because you can't do housing without talking about economic development. You can't do either of those things without talking about affordability, cost of living, and then how are we addressing all of those things, which you can't really realistically do without a strategic plan. So I think it makes a lot of sense that all of those things are coming together at once. I mean, just the other caution, but an observation, is that this is one of the more cohesive councils in some time. I mean, you certainly had good cohesive councils in the past, but it's been a little bit since that happened, and what I've seen over and over is infighting on council has stopped forward motion on housing more than any sort of staff saying, oh, but wait, we need this or we need that, or we can't do this or we can't do that. So that is really key, and that's why I think perfect that you guys are having the discussion and kind of getting your heads together.
That actually was a very key point.
It wasn't your turn.
Yeah, hey, I'm jumping in. I'm taking, who's it? I got
Keep
Carmen's
him in
Oh,
line.
He would be. AI, make note of that I was cut off. So I guess the part on B, what has been difficult, coming from like just like a nuts and bolts perspective, I think what I was hoping, and you clarified a bit of it, is like the actual things that have held up potential progress. Like, has it been zoning? Like, have we talked to developers who said the cost of land acquisition is too much? Like, have we had any tangible difficulty executing a plan that was in place? Or is this where, I don't wanna say, where ideas have come to die, where they have not flourished? You know, you mentioned council, but when I read that question, what has been difficult about past efforts, it was maybe, you know, you have, and we'll use Glass Farm as an example, if to keep something affordable, that land might have to be given to the developer to keep costs down, then they do the development. Like, have we had any of that, or is it still, it's just been difficult navigating community, volume, each other? Because that's what it sounds like so far.
And so far, I can tell you in my 12 years, you're absolutely spot on. We have not approached developers. We've had, I'll take it back. We did have a developer come in and talk to us. Some members of the council at that time did not like the other developers coming in because it wasn't the local developer. So they would not entertain it. But it wasn't a serious conversation, let me just say that. There was a builder in town that was trying to do some things, and the same council people voiced their opinion, and he didn't close the deal, and he moved to Columbus, shut his business down. So the difficult part is getting past the start line.
Johnny, would you agree it's fair to say, or Judy, that we haven't really had much proactive, like, meaning it's not like we have a plan and then we're like, let's go figure out how people would respond to this plan. Most of our development is reactive. It's like people decide they want to do a thing and then we're in response to them.
Correct.
So I think that's like the big turn that we're trying to make, is to say, what is it that we want to do?
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll find out, oh, well, what you want to do is extremely hard. And so I think, you know, taking like Glass Farm, for example, we got into this conversation 2 or 3 years ago, where it's like, okay, so let's say our big asset is land, right? So let's say that you want to work with the developer. There was a point where it's like, okay, so do we do, you give the land and you say, okay, you can, if you develop 10% of the units for, low income, affordable, for sale, whatever the, with some affordability, whatever components, that would be okay? Is it 20%? Is it 30%? Is it 90%? And so there's a big difference there, but we don't really know, in part because I don't think we've ever really systematically asked. The best it is sort of anecdotal information.
The other thing I'll say that's been difficult, but we've changed, we're on the other side of it now, is we was relying on a lot of outside sources to try to get us through the building department and economic development, where we're in-house now. I don't think the zoning's an issue. We changed some zoning things. And so we've made it easier. We're just to the step that we need to take it further, because we have the crews to be able to do things. We have the system in place for the building department. We have good rapport now, whereas when I got here in 14 and prior to that working here, nobody was welcome in Yellow Springs. No contractors. They avoided it like the plague. You was 2 miles per hour over on 68. You was getting pulled over because you was an out-of-towner and you was getting a ticket. We've squashed that to where now people want to build. I mean, I got here in 14 and Birch 3 was being developed and it only had like 7 houses. And now there's only 2 lots left, so we have come a long way. We're in a good place. We just have to have the path to the finish line.
I'm going to just throw in my few other little notes on lessons learned or sort of things to throw in for the future. So I think proactive plans, documented, I think is that's a key issue. Then I think we need dedicated capacity. So either we have to get clear of, hey, here are the current staff and the things that they can do, and have direction and clarity that we're all on the same page, or we have to identify resources to be able to bring in capacity to be able to do the things. But I think part of the reason that we haven't, I think one of the pieces is that we have so many people, we have so few people who have any capacity to work on this project and work through the complexity, that it means that it's hard for us to get very far on it. So somehow or another, saying, here is sort of the dedicated capacity or sort of expectation around doing work around housing and having, again, this, to me, this is about having clear goals, having clear outcomes, having timelines. So that feels important. I think another thing that's sort of unrelated to this, another thing that popped up as I was looking over the whole packet that I just want to flag is, I think we should more often talk about the actual dollar figures that are related to these concepts. So like, for example, the median income on the census right now for Yellow Springs is $85,982. We don't actually define in the terms whether we're talking about Yellow Springs or the Dayton statistical area, which is $71,739. At 80%, which is the number that we're using, that's $68,800, which is $33 an hour. So just for context, like most of us that are aware of trying to figure out how to create housing opportunities for folks that live in the village, you just look at it statistically, like that's not our retail, hospitality, service sector workers.
Kevin, that 80% number, was that on the Dayton number or the Yellow Springs number?
The Yellow Springs is 85,982
And that's
now, and it gets updated.
Right.
And Dayton was 71,739, which is $27 an hour.
So when you say the 80%, which did you calculate that on the Yellow Springs number?
It's 33 an hour for Yellow Springs and
Okay.
27 an hour for Dayton. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just throwing out there that there's these points where we talk about these things that I think people aren't really understanding. And I think we have an awful lot of workers that are making notably less than that I think we're all actually trying to figure out how to provide opportunities for. So anyway, that's a learning for me. And then the last thing I want to throw out is that I think we have some really hard decisions to make about how we want to approach market rate housing. If you look at the Bowen pieces of the packet, and there's one other thing that maybe we'll send out as a follow-up that I think is really helpful that we were using a lot as we were doing housing committee stuff in the past, is the numbers that just show here's how many units were projected and then here's how many we have so far. And what you'll see is that we basically have made virtually no headway in any of the lower income categories, but on the market rate side, we're right up against the goals maybe already, and then with the projects that are on the horizon now, we're going to far surpass. So it's really fascinating, right, that in 2018, these experts look at it and they say, this is how many units you need or could support, and I think that's one of the questions I have is like, I think we need to work on how are they defining that? Because the market certainly, 8 years later, has shown that it can support a lot more market rate housing. Which then I think it is sort of a concrete question of, do we want to incentivize, do we want to allow, where is the line of how much do we want to see market rate housing, particularly single family home housing develop in the village. And I think that is it's just a thing we haven't really talked about. Over the last few years, we've tried to kind of bring it up at different points, but it's been, I think this is to Judy's point, where there hasn't been unanimity on council, or it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. Nobody wants to okay, now I'm in, shut the door for the next person, and we're seeing, racial diversity drop, median age increase, affordability drop, and you're trying to figure out how do you square those things, and part of it is functionally, the market does what the market does. Like the market is going to make it so that it is going to get more, if it's a desirable place, that's going to get more unaffordable. And so do we actually want to do anything about that? I think it's kind of it's a pretty key question. That on some level it has if you decide that you want to do something about it, then you know then you know what you need to look at to try to make decisions about it. We've never been able to get to that point, I think because it's so uncomfortable that nobody wants to say, I want to shut the door on somebody else. Anyway, so that's another, I feel like the last kind of like learning or big question I want to throw out there that I'm thinking about with this stuff.
Well, and just to piggyback on that, I think there's a lot of tension for that, for folks who are just barely able to stay in the village because of utility costs. I mean, the affordability issue in the village is massive. So there's a lot of resentment, I think, in that group and fear, saying, well, here you are working to bring folks here. I may have to leave because you're not at the same time working on the affordability picture. So I think any housing effort should also include, well, and we want them to be able to stay here, so we also have to address affordability. We also want these folks not to have to leave here. So that, those things are happening at the same time or being thoughtfully addressed at the same time. Otherwise, I think the pushback will be severe.
All right, so I hate that every time we talk about affordability, this is just me as the manager and me as the infrastructure and utility guy. I hate every time we talk about affordability in the village, it always points towards utilities, right? It never points towards our property taxes. It never points towards sales taxes. It never points, it's always utilities because we're the only ones that can do anything about utilities. So I think when we talk about affordability in the village, it needs to be as a whole. I don't see people complaining about the new iPhones that they go buy and they spend thousands of dollars for. Oh, the utilities are high. Well, so's your phone. So we have to take it, I mean, gas is $4 a gallon and nobody's saying, oh, it's tough to live in the village because gas is $4 a gallon. So we gotta, it's just a pet peeve of mine and it could be totally out of line, but when we talk about affordability in the village, we can't just blame it on utilities because the utilities are costing because that's what they cost. I wish we didn't have a water plant loan, but we needed a water plant. I wish that we didn't have to pay transmission costs to get the power here, but we do have to pay it. We are self-sufficient. We're probably the only one in the local area that is self-sufficient and we can control our prices to a point, but we still gotta pay our bills. So, our mortgage goes up. We're not complaining to the village that our mortgage went up. Holy crap, I can't afford to live in the village, my mortgage went up. No, it points to, the damn utilities are too high.
Yeah.
I would say people complain about all those other things.
Did I just hear, it may be a trigger.
The audience for
It may
that.
be a trigger.
They're not coming to you to complain about their property taxes because you're not that audience, so you're just catching all that. Totally
I
understand.
fully understand.
Totally, but I do all of those things.
And it still falls under the umbrella of-
Are beaten in that pulse.
Yeah, affordable living versus just affordable housing. Like,
You know,
there's multiple components that can
The
comprise
cost of
affordability.
cabbage at Tom's, people will lose their mind over that, so.
Yeah, just don't. Well, and the reason we're talking about housing is because it's the biggest chunk of most people's expenses. And then many of these other things, they add up, but they are just a smaller piece functionally. And if you look at, and the cost of living study is, it's whatever, it's one little set of data. But for the most part, we're like within the sort of normal range on basically everything except for water, which we know that that's an issue. We've got to figure, talk about that more, but it is ultimately, it seems like it's largely about the fact that we're so small, trying to provide such a resource with our water plant. But basically everything else, on property taxes, on all, on electric rates, on sewer rates, is within, it's gonna be about the same everywhere. And yeah, the fact is that housing prices have gone bananas. And so this, part of the reason why the change you've seen since 2017 is because the housing market has gone crazy. And it's, and anybody who has been living here has benefited from that. Now, it's a tricky situation for people that's their main source of wealth, which is, I think, a decent chunk of people in town, they aren't they're not benefiting from, you know, wage gains, but they've benefited from, you know, the increase of their property value. Anyway, so I agree with Stephanie. I think you have a unique perspective on it, but I think it is like, I just want to make sure we're all clear that the reason we're talking about housing is just because that's the big chunk of people's, that's the biggest chunk of people's income. So if we can do something about it, great. If not, we'll probably continue to see the changes that we've seen.
Great. Well, I think it's a very smooth transition into being more explicit, the second part of what do we believe is our role in directing housing and why. And included in the packet were different definitions of affordable and low-income housing. I think something that's come up from several people in several venues is what is our working definition, and then using that to be like, what is our guiding principle of why we're working on this, why is it a priority, why are we engaging? And you know, everything that we've said up until now, I think all of that is true, but I think it'll really benefit us in this work and in communication with the community of like, let's try to be as explicit and clear about why we're spending this time right now to engage in this way.
Well, I'll just build off what I said about the dollar amount thing. I mean, this is like, it's kind of feels like a messaging, like communications issue of like, I kind of feel like when we are using these terms, we should just go ahead and define them in that place. So just affordable housing, dash 80% of AMI, which is X, 80% of Yellow Springs AMI, which is X, or if we want to use Dayton's, just, it's one sentence. It could become a normal thing to then, instead of having people wonder, what are they talking about? Here's how much you have to make an hour. You know, I think that will resonate with everybody. An annual salary and hourly amount. At that point, how much more specificity can you expect to give? I mean, I think everybody would get that. So that would be like a suggestion of a practice. It's just that if we're writing a memo, if we're talking at council and you're referencing affordability, just name the numbers. And it's the site I always use is the Census Reporter site. It's like a site that was built for reporters to gather information on the census. It's the preeminent data source for everything in the United States, and it's super accessible. You can gather the information really quickly at any point. They update it when there's updates to the census data. Anyway.
So is that 80% irrespective of the size of your family?
So there is like a chart for it. They average it for, like, when we're using 80% of AMI is it's a median, but there are breakouts that go based on size of family.
Okay.
That's just the one that's most typically used. I think because it's so much easier. I mean, I assume that's why everybody uses median. It's just that it gets really complicated when you're figuring out. And we're different, right? You probably saw in the study, we have a smaller average household size than other communities. We are older. So there are some ways that we're different, notably statistically, and we could use a different number than AMI if we wanted to, but it's just, that's so widely used that it's probably the best thing to keep things simple.
Yeah, if you try to use a different number, somebody would want to know how you come up with that number.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have, this was interesting, Judy helped pull this out, the definitions in the zoning code. And I think the 30% is also, a number that the affordable, meaning people are not paying more than 30% for housing costs. Like, I think that's also a number that is tangible and relatable for people in as we're describing what it is. And the first time I read the Bowen study, estimated 43.3% of renter-occupied households in Yellow Springs are paying more than 30%. And that, you know, it's like a thing we know and a thing we hear on the street, and then it's like, there it is, 43.3% is a very high amount of people who are not renting affordably. So I think it's like, yeah, having the specific numbers, but also knowing there's different ways to cut it to make it more understandable for the average person.
Yeah, you could, another easy thing you could add to that, you know, short summary would be, here's how much you should be spending, you know, that person would be spending a month on housing and then, because, you know, we had this conversation most obviously with the Windsor project, where there's a point where you're like, oh, the monthly rents they're gonna charge are going to be, they're not, like, we talk about affordable rents, they're not numbers that most of the people, that when you'd ask people what affordable means, like when you see somebody posting a house for rent on Yellow Springs bulletin board, and then a bunch of people go, that is insane,
Yeah.
the number is not that high compared to what the market actually is doing, essentially. And so then that's the gap. It's because, you know, 70% of people in Yellow Springs are making under $100,000 a year. So half of the people in little, 43% of people are making not enough to have it so that housing cannot be a burden based on all of the, you know, data that anyone uses. And then let's be honest, the reality is that the 30% of people who are making over $100,000 a year are the most vocal people about, like it's definitely disproportionate that the people that are most vocal about housing, and particularly are most vocal in, well, I won't go too far, I'll just say, we have a disproportionate conversation because the people who are housing secure are more vocal than the people who are not, even though statistically that is a larger number of people. I mean, that's fair, right? I'm not trying to, I'm just acknowledging a dynamic that is real, is that we don't hear from those 43.3% of renters that are paying over 30% of their income nearly as often as we hear from people that are not in that position.
So for this portion where we're actually doing the review of definitions, speaking back to like.
All of you are goddamn monkeys. No, because I'm not.
Do we need any assistance? Do we need assistance or shit?
It's Judy's.
Okay. No, you're okay. You're okay. The Windsor definition, so when we talk about like affordability and affordable housing, what other metrics, can you talk about what other, like, do you know anything? So for instance, let's use Windsor, and this is not to point at them, but $1,500, right? That's been the number that's been thrown out by them. And by code or by law, that might be 80% AMI. If we're using that as the baseline, it might drop that rent to $1,200, and that's their affordable component. Is that the definition that we want to go off of, is what you're saying at? Is that manipulating numbers? I'm trying to validate like what is our number? Do we have a target number for affordable housing, or is it, because it's hard to hold someone accountable if we don't have like a target also.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to say, Windsor, you didn't meet the requirement, when by law they did, right?
And the short answer is no.
Yeah.
We don't have those targets, and I think everyone here wants them, and it's just, and I think the Bowen study is like, after that piece of data, we don't really have any excuses left, because
Yeah.
we had numbers. I don't know enough about how the Bowen, I wasn't here, so I don't know enough about how the Bowen study was developed, to what degree the numbers of units they projected were needed or were possible matched a goal, like a sort of how we want to spread out the number of units.
Yeah.
But that's what we have to do this time. Hopefully they're gonna tell us, hey, here's how many units we think are wanted, and this is where it gets into, it's math.
Yeah.
It's complex math of how do you define who wants what. But then we gotta sit down and set goals. We gotta say, we want, I know we were at a conference, Angie and I, last year with some folks from Boulder, Colorado, that they have like a percentage of units of their housing market that they want to be affordable to low-income people at AMI. Like, they have it
Yeah.
right down to the, and I think that's what we need to do. And then, like we started to do with Bowen, then acknowledge when things get a little off kilter. And I think now it's a little off kilter. We've got more market rate, not enough, affordable to low-income and moderate-income rentals. And so then you've got a mismatch. Okay, now what policy decisions we make so that you try to get the development happening in the way that you want it to. Because, we just haven't named that, but we should.
That's something to put on the list. I know it's further down in the topics, but when you talk about a housing commissioner committee, that they should have a clear list of goals, and that's such a deep dive that I think that's a really good one to put over in that pocket.
We started to get to that a couple of years ago, and the thing is, y'all, just to be clear, it's aspirational, but I think it's come up at different points in community conversations. I think people reasonably want to know, what this is there an end point to this? Is there ever going to be enough? The functional reality is, probably it's going to be a fight forever.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a desirable community with, that's effectively landlocked with the green belt. Property values to be close to town are going to go up. So we're going to be battling, and then it becomes a question of what do you do about it? In its most extreme circumstances, in ski towns in Colorado, towns build workforce housing for people that do the retail, hospitality, and service work that keeps the place livable, right? That is so we've never gone anywhere near that to my knowledge. I don't think it's that far, but man, when you have the number of village staff who live and work in the village, the number of teachers, the number of other, and then not to certainly service, retail, and hospitality sector workers who live here, it's a real bummer. I think we all share that idea. So then the question is, what do you do about it? How far are you willing to go?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Boulder, and so that example, and then most recently I was in Ann Arbor, and so Ann Arbor also is similar, and a very interesting case study in terms of how prices have shot up, and complete, lack of affordability. The University of Michigan is a huge contributor to this, and their location and the amount, how massive they are, how much money they bring in, how much money they have in their endowment, and then the fact that, that is non-taxable land. And so some friends who are involved in different commissions there, and we were there over spring break with the kids, and they pointed out this brand new building, and they're like, the city of Ann Arbor just built this rental apartments, and so the ground level was community center, different resources, and then kind of wrap around, not fully, but in that direction, and then 3 stories of apartments in a historically black neighborhood that had been gentrified. And I think I had this moment where I was looking at it, it's the vertical progress is in front of me, and just being like, yes, we are not Boulder or we are not Ann Arbor, but we are like a destination tourist town in many ways that has experienced the exact same issues. So I think that example is it's unheard of. I think, when we're talking about Lawson Place, it's unheard of, I think, many times in our size, but it's not unheard of in bigger cities who are facing gentrification on a different scale. But the Economic Equity Conference we went to, we were the smallest community by far, but everybody was really doing this work and building, the community foundations and the municipalities. They're building low-income housing, and they're renting out units as well. So I think my point is we're not the same, but we are the same.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Interesting about that is if, it's a lot of moving parts, but for example, if the responsibility for sidewalks went back to homeowners and the TGL and hotel tax money then went to offsetting what happens when you're using TGLs for TGLs instead of ADUs that could be long-term rental. So if some of that money were directed towards, workforce or more affordable housing, it would be a justifiable use of it. Right now it goes to, infrastructure takes a beating because of the destination factor, so that's where it's more generally directed. But, it's a thought. I mean, there's just so many different things that are possibilities for, helping the effort.
So I was in Ann Arbor a couple years ago, and noticed, I was noticing all of the development, the housing development, and they must have taken their zoning code and just pitched all setbacks out the window, because, they are building up against lot lines, they are squeezing developments in impossibly small places, I'm sure to accommodate that. So it is an interesting case study in terms of how they're doing that, because it's really striking how densely they're developing, which then, of course, brings up infrastructure concerns.
So to this thing, to connect that to like the guiding principle, I do think we have like some, at least like guardrail decisions we have to make. So like there's sort of this push-pull of, on the one hand, I think everybody here really values the pace and the, I think there's a lot of people that are concerned about there being too many people here. Because, a lot of people chose to live here because it's like, we like the quiet, calm pace. Well, that's in direct conflict with, do we want to allow building as much as possible in order to alleviate housing costs? So there's some choices that have to be made there of how many people, and I think this gets into some of the kind of strategic planning kind of questions. We talked about this at this growth work session we did last summer, I think, about a year ago. But anyway, so that there are these sort of guiding questions of who do we think the village is for? What's the size? Are we okay with the amount of inflow and outflow of employees? Is it okay with us that there are a lot of people who work here but live somewhere else? Or is that something that we want to address? You see what I'm getting at? There are these sort of guiding sort of questions about who do we want to be as a place that then determine whether or not you change your rules. And there's obviously been some people who have advocated very strongly for saying, open up the zoning, make it much more easy to build. And it's largely based on sort of the market theory that if we allow more building, that there will be more housing options and that there will then be more affordability, which is its own, there's some complexity to that, especially with some of our, conservation land use, and, there's some questions around that. But you see that those are there's a series of questions that we need to have a little more of an answer to before we can solve. It's like an algebra problem where you have to fill in some of the variables before you can answer. Does that make sense?
Well, and to your point, I think some of the anxiety, it's exactly around what you're talking about. Because when folks talk about affordable housing, and then we see, okay, well, Spring Meadows is happening, and there are other things that are sort of happening, maybe Windsor will happen. Folks are thinking, what, do you just want to make it so everyone who wants to come here can come here? And then it's not going to be Yellow Springs. And I moved here so it would be Yellow Springs. That position isn't as NIMBY-ish, because it really is, it looks like you want everyone who wants to come here to be able to come here, and we don't see any end point. You just want crap tons of housing.
Yeah.
So if that growth discussion also is taking place.
Crap ton.
Yeah, not so.
With, this is what we see as a reasonable increase so that it is more affordable, still a village, still what we want, accommodates more, doesn't put too much pressure on the infrastructure. That's a whole lot of moving parts, but that, I think it's a necessary conversation because the anxiety is real.
Yeah, I think, Judy, you kind of just inspired me to be like, the way that I answer this, what is my guiding principle of why I want this to be a priority topic, is that the people who are on the high end of the spectrum can live here. The market, the reality of the society we live in, they will have access and they will have options. When you look at this side of the spectrum, we are not from my perspective as a community, we are not being proactive enough in addressing the maintenance of opportunities or protection of opportunities for this end of the spectrum to live here. And if we let the natural market forces flow in our capitalist society, like this is just gonna become less and less and less. So I've been in this like debate with people who are like, well, you just want any person to be able to come here and live here. I mean, we're talking about, and then you can break it down and be like, I'm gonna give you examples of people I know right now who live here who aren't gonna be able to live here anymore, or who grew up here and had kids and couldn't stay here, right? So there's like the reality of the people who are a part of our community. For me, that is definitely defined by the people who work here and invest in making the place what it is, who don't have enough options to live here. So it's like, I think that argument to me is it's like we can take a snapshot of where we are right now, but also if we don't do anything and we are looking into the future, 20 years from now, it's not that version of what they're saying, the Yellow Springs that I came for. It's not gonna be that.
Well, and I think there's a widespread concern that has changed notably in a way that is not in line with that, right? That I think there's a lot of people that I think in general you would hear people saying they like the racial diversity, they like the the income diversity, they like the a small town where your families know their, and then functionally, you're getting to be older, you're getting to be whiter, you're getting to be richer in a way that statistically is not in line with what it is that people came for. I think if you take that, I think that's a pretty widely held sort of mentality. But you could see how if we were to define, hey, here's how much we want to grow, well then you can back out and say, all right, then how many units do you need? And then make a plan for how many units. Right now, we don't have that kind of specificity. There's also interrelated questions around like the character of the community, right? So this also gets to the questions around zoning. There's I think people like it because it's an eclectic housing mix. And so then you get into, well, what about when there's cookie cutter housing? Or what about when and these things are directly related, right? Where it's like if you have a high bar of what the aesthetics are gonna look like, then that may also make it so that the housing or the cost of building is higher. I mean, I think almost always that will be the case. So that is part of it. Is I think people are expecting this place to be a certain way, and I think it's part of our job to define what is that certain way. What are we aiming for? Then we can work backwards to make plans around how we build that.
What are people's appetite for like trying to, which is, I think what, could be on the list of tasks for the committee, but to have some clarity, to actually have like a statement about why we're doing this. And for example, when I was rereading the comprehensive land use plan, they had this opening statement, Yellow Springs will promote retention, rehabilitation, development of diverse types of rental and home ownership housing, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, there's clarity here in what they want to focus on. It says with focus on low-income workforce and senior households. It's like, I almost feel like we need something like this, but with also the why, which is to maintain a community that is racially and economically diverse and blah, blah, blah. But it's just like, I think all of this, in my mind, is part of the groundwork we need to do so that when we need to start engaging with the community and people who are struggling with the vision or don't see themselves in it or have anxieties about where they fit into this, like, we need something that we go back to, which is like, this is the guiding light of where we're headed. And then I guess it's like, has the council done that before? Has the village done that before?
Not in such an intentional way, I don't think. And it's also, how people are like, well, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and I did the stuff and I got the things because I worked hard.
Yeah.
So, and then you have to acknowledge, well, when you were able to purchase your home here, less of the economy of the village was dependent upon tourism and that kind of an economy, which then upped the housing values tremendously, and economically, there were fewer lucrative places to work. I mean, Book Plate, bye. Most of Antioch, bye. So if the intent is to look more like this when those opportunities were here, but we don't have those opportunities yet, and there's an intentional, we understand that some of the economic issues need to be addressed, and that is part of this effort, but also to make us look more like that, we have to provide more opportunity in the realm of housing, because things have changed. You can't just walk in and afford that home now because we've successfully grown the destination market.
Yeah, I read the packet and that's from the comp plan, the thing
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of having some document that we just come back to all the time and some clear set of statements. For me, it's the Bowen thing where it's like, here's how many of each unit, and then the part that says, here's how many of each kind, and it's like, there's a gap, what do we do about the gap? But somehow or another, like, and I would go as far as like, I want to write it down and like put it in every packet. Just like, because for me, we didn't actually end up doing this in the goals, but it's like, I kind of want to go over the goals and do like a prioritization, because to me, this is like far and away the top priority, because to me, it is far and away the most impactful thing of what our community looks like that we are working on. So I'm interested in the other things we're doing, but I think that's why all the council people that are running for council put it down as a top priority. It's a thing everybody's wondering about. Anyway, so the idea of having something written down and taking a shot at it and then referring to it and setting goals based on it, I think that would be awesome.
I think it's important, for sure.
So you're talking about like a housing mission statement.
Here you go.
So the only nuance to that is comprehensive plans hold a certain place in the law, not as strong in Ohio as they do in some other states, but so when you make like a zoning decision, for example, and you point at your comp plan, that can be one of the bolstering the finding of why the decision was made and how it was made. So I don't know exactly how that would play into it, but we'd want to phrase it in such a way that if you did make zoning decisions based on it, you could point to it as a support for that decision.
And I know I really do want to make zoning decisions based on, I mean, that's what we've been.
We know you do.
We've been stuck in this for the last few years. It's tricky because there's an idea of what I think is generally wanted, but it's not totally spelled out. And so then we're just at Planning Commission, like going off of what's in the code as it exists. That's all we're allowed to do legally. But if we could have some more guidance of here's what we would like to see the outcomes be, well then we can work on updating the code so that the outcomes are are more likely to, lead in that direction, and then have something to check back on. I assume everybody got the message from Susan Stiles, what stuff she was thinking about, and the idea of like look back on, oh, we did this in order to do this. Is it working? Like that's a good thing to do every now and then.
So if I can speak to that for a second, I'm about to say what Judy was just about to say. When you take land, council takes land, for example, and the village, and rezones it from like RA to RC, right? So now you've taken it from RA where you can only build a single-family home, well, not really anymore under our code, but for example, RA, single-family homes, RC, you can build multifamily. So by rezoning it, it's like, hey, this is great, right? So now we'll get multifamily on that land. Not necessarily, right? Because when you rezone to a more intensive land use, you still include all the less intensive land uses by law. So just because land is zoned RC, once a developer comes into possession of it and looks to develop, they don't have to build multifamily as the code's currently structured. They can build single-family homes on 1 acre lots if they want to, right? Because there's just minimum thresholds that have to be met There's no, we don't flip that on its head.
It's like raising this part, but it's not
But
raising
you
this
don't
part.
eliminate
Yeah,
the lower
you're not
part, it gets
eliminating
swept
it,
along
yeah.
with it and stays with it. So, yeah, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that just because land is zoned RC doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna get multifamily. They could still develop
Well, you've
single,
lost your negotiating power.
single family. And then the flip side of that is, for example, if somebody comes in and says, oh, I'm gonna build, whatever I'm gonna build here, condos or townhomes or multifamily, and then the village says, well, yeah, great, do that, but we also want this in return. They have the zoning by right at that point. They have that RC zoning, and they can move forward with it as it's currently zoned. So, important to keep in mind, probably, I think, for Glass Farm most of all, at this point. But, yeah, I think that caused some confusion. along the
That's
way.
helpful.
Well, and also, I mean, we will be getting a planning and zoning administrator who will be able to, give guidance on this, which will be a very good thing, and it's been made clear in all the interviews, this is, something of high importance. But then the other part that's really important is you gotta listen to that person, because that person was screaming from the rooftops, don't bring it in at RC, you're gonna lose your, no, you don't know what you're talking about. We need this and housing. Yes, but, nope, housing. Whoop, in it came. And now, several years later, you know what, that was a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So not only do you need those professionals, you need to also listen to them, and then if you think that you have a disagreement, engage in a careful and full discussion instead of just, well, you've got to be wrong, because we also have citizens out here saying that they want that also.
I'll just say, I think there's more complexity here. This could be a longer conversation, because the main strategy around RC to RA is essentially a long-term incremental approach. The short-term sort of question of do you lose leverage is interesting. That makes sense. I think it becomes a question of if what we want is more multifamily development, then we should incentivize and build code toward that end, as opposed to leaving the door open widely. Leaving the door open widely is more for a long term where, okay, somebody builds a single family home now, but then in a few years they want to add some more, they want to add a, addition, or they want to put in some other, they want to put a, unit in the back of their property, and that creates some more flexibility. And that over time, and I assume y'all have all been to, like, the block that I was born on in Chicago, started out as all single-family homes, and now it's like, 30 years later, it's almost all multi-unit condo buildings. And that's just because they have zoning flexibility there was enough pressure in that area that one by one, and it literally got to the point where there were people who just bulldoze the whole thing and build a new, and then, literally my block has like 2 houses left that were not bulldozed and built into condos, because there was enough pressure in that area that people would do it.
And those houses are worth millions of dollars.
Yeah, and that's what they're preparing for, is that's what, the people, when we've had conversations about zoning, it's definitely a long-term incremental approach. That's just one piece of the puzzle. I think there's also a question of, do we want to take shorter-term, less incremental approaches to try to address the issues, not in this sort of little by little way.
Okay, great. Zoning is a topic. So I thought I was gonna put up the 6 topics here, we take a 5-minute break, and then, you can come up here. What we're gonna do is, essentially, zoning is one of the topics, and then you're just gonna come in here, and then for the 6 topics, just write in, you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in 5 minutes, when we
Okay,
come
perfect.
back and sit down, we'll be able to see, how.
Is this because everybody didn't do their homework? Is that what you're saying?
No, you're taking
Is
your
this what we
homework,
did in our
translating it to the
I'll put
whiteboard.
it up here.
Okay.
And I can put it up here if you want.
Okay, so I didn't
Yeah.
understand the homework, so I did it a couple ways.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
Then the dog
is
ate
it,
it.
are you ranking it between the 7 that you have?
Yeah, there's
Oh.
6.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it confused me because it said 1 to 10.
I know.
It
That
should be
was a
1 to
mistake.
6.
Yeah, 1 to 6. We
Okay,
had.
I did it right
Judy
first
made
time.
a note about that.
Yeah.
You know what, I may have only
10
sent that to
topics at
count.
first.
Council.
Oh.
I may have only sent it to
She
not
sent a
them.
correction to us, but not to you.
Yeah, it could be in the 500 emails and it's still not open.
No, I was glad for the correction too, because I was trying to figure out, like, was I rating them like 1 to 10 importance? So then was I
You
gonna
guys,
rank like?
I was looking at it and I was like,
I got mine.
I don't understand the thing that I wrote.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's bad.
So it would be what we rank as the top out of the,
So should we put like our number and like our initials next to it, so we know where we were ranked?
I would just use the same color code, and then we can go to each person maybe or something like that.
Okay.
Show you.
I mean, we could do, we could go around, I just thought we could do it along with the break.
Yeah.
We don't have to-
I'm just gonna pull up my,
I had yours, you want me to?
Can we make note, Angie,
I had
that,
yours.
Angie, can we make a note that this guiding principle thing, I do think we should work on that,
Okay.
FYI. Like, I think it's
Okay.
pretty
yeah.
definitive that we should do that. I need,
This is fun, I'm having fun.
Sorry,
I love stuff like this. You're gonna be having more fun.
Should we like hit pause or something while we're on break?
Oh, probably.
He will cut it out, and it's not
Oh,
live
cut this out,
streaming.
okay.
Yeah, he always cuts out the breaks, yeah.
You're on camera,
famous last
Sorry.
word.
but it'll be
recorded.
off, this part will be cut out.
Over there.
I'm just
all
noting,
the time.
See? Look at it.
Oh,
Yeah.
he woke up.
truffles at my
Okay.
pocket all the time.
All right.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. So I'll give a little context before we come and start to actually look at the numbers. You know, everybody told me once I said, I'm excited about this, I want to work on this, everyone's like, there's too much. And so with Judy's guiding hand, we were talking through I had 10 topics at first, and it was like, too much. So obviously this does not capture everything, so I am gonna throw up a parking lot, so if throughout the day, if there's a topic that you want us to talk about and you're not seeing it anywhere, that definitely exists, so I'm just actually gonna put it here right now. And feel free to add to it, and there's time in the agenda where we're gonna come back and look at what's here. And I think it'll be interesting for everyone to see, the topics that aren't included. As Gavin was just mentioning, yeah, some of these topics are massive. Zoning is massive. There's different ways to cut it. What does rentals mean? It is just a place for us to figure out where do we want to put the order of how we talk about these things, and also just to get a sense, a temperature check of how everyone else in the room feels about this topic. What we're going to do is we're going to look at this together, and then we're going to make a group ranking based off these numbers, and then we're going to start discussing these topics in that order. We're going to give each topic 20 minutes to start. If we get to a topic and it's like, we don't use 20 minutes, we're just going to wait till the end, and we can decide if we want to return to something or skip over something, if that's what the group decides together.
We're gonna do 20 minutes right now for each topic, or?
We're going to
after-
start,
after
and
it?
then we're going to continue after the break.
Okay.
And then, when we've had that discussion time, we're gonna come back and do this again, and see if it's changed, see if the group's ranking has changed of where we wanna focus. Any questions, comments? Okay, so, we could total the numbers, is one way to do it.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay, you're doing, okay, great, do that.
24, 16, 36, 16, 35.
Okay, oh,
I knew
too
one-
fast.
I knew one.
24, 16,
16,
36,
36,
16,
16,
35,
35,
37.
37. Okay, so with that, we have one, let's say this is tied at one. This would be number 2, correct? Number 3, wow, those are all close. 3, 4,
number 37.
5. Wait, yes.
You doubled one, yeah.
Yeah, because they're the same, yeah, okay. And also seeing that the numbers 3, 4, and 5 all fall,
In the same kind of.
yeah, fall in the same number, kind of a bit after. There's a gap of 36 to 24. Any initial thoughts?
It warms my solicitor heart that zoning came in too.
You're here for a reason.
Well, yeah, my initial thought is I'm not putting too much weight on it because there's so much
Yeah.
difference in how one might define. Like even you wrote ZRH, but then conservation development is like, they're
Yeah.
arguably like two, anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like, okay, this is a starting
Yeah.
place. We're trying to get some temperature check, but I'm not putting too much weight on it.
Yeah.
Personally.
Great. Okay. Do you guys want to start with Glass Farm or rentals?
I'll vote rentals.
Alphabetically.
I'll go rentals,
Okay.
just because I have the most questions about
Okay.
it. It wasn't my number one though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a number 5 in there. That's Johnny.
I just
So-
thought this was a category that was broad. I mean, all of these categories
Yeah,
are pretty
so
broad.
why don't we hear a little bit from people why they ranked it as 1 or 2, and then definitely hear from Johnny about his ranking.
So, sorry, real quick, just so I know you just went over this, but you're saying roughly 20 minutes a topic,
Yeah.
and are we trying to like land something, or like what's the,
Yes, okay, so I would say all of this is working towards, at 150, we're gonna have an hour to try to nail down some goals for 2026, 2027 on housing. It doesn't need to be perfectly formulated, but we want to give some direction to the group, the people who will be working on this more intensely in whatever structure they end up working in. So we want to give direction of what our goals are, and that is, I mean, what's missing, right, from our goals form right now is what the housing goals are. So we are using this with the goal of getting specific about what our goals are for the next 2 years in relation to housing.
Okay, so way I'm hearing that is, don't spend all the time talking about the thing theoretically or asking questions, especially
Yeah.
if we might be able to answer that in some longer form. Try to spend at least a decent chunk of the time, okay, what do we want to do about it? And trying to get to kind of get a feel for where the group's at on that. Is that
Yeah,
a good sign?
yeah, and I think specifics are great at this point. Let's try to be specific about what we want to do, what hypothetically we could do in that topic.
Okay, well, I'll try. You
Yeah.
tell me. So like on rentals, my understanding is that several of there's not that many. Some of the multi-unit rentals in town have major deferred maintenance issues and/or are in the process of sale or something. I think that's accurate. So, it seems like somehow or another having some kind of, having a discussion and at least consciously deciding not to do something about rental maintenance feels like a question. I am generally inclined to think I would like to have some standards of livability maintained, and that on multi-family units, that there would be some kind of standard. Just to put it out there, that's my initial thinking, but I'd like us to decide, are we, because, like when there's the big fire at Hawthorne, like it's scary. It feels like we haven't done anything to stop this, and should we, and we haven't changed anything about our practice to my knowledge. So is this the kind of thing, like rentals,
Yeah.
that feels like a thing. I'm like, let's have an approach to thinking about these things.
Yeah, I'll continue. I'm interested in that. What are the tools we can use to have standard of living, to enforce that, yeah, I think for me as a community member, there are a lot of people who care about this. This is on people's minds, and again, we go back to that, like 43%. And also a renter registry is something that has come up a lot. I've heard a lot of good examples of how that benefits communities. So those are two specific things in this category that I've been learning about.
I had a few notes on rentals. I guess the end part was really, I was viewing this as more like existing versus new. So I kind of categorized all of this into like current protective measures and kind of like prosperous ones, like Glass Farm is a build upon, and rentals is a current status. How do we protect? So part of that was like rental inspections, like how do we keep up with that, if that's something that we can even do. The rental registration, and then of course where we fall short, which is quality rental housing. And then there was that part in the packet that Vancouver kind of like reduced vacancy by 54% through some level of affordability impact. And so that's what I was trying to really get to the gist of, is more current renters' protections, rights, and then long-term sustainability of cost effectiveness. That's it.
And that's where I fall in, why it's my number one, is because I think, yeah, there's a lot to be done, and that we should be doing something around, the health and safety of rentals that are out there. Whether it's, we have housing codes that are or are not being enforced, and how we approach doing that gently, not to, I believe that landlords have issues sometimes just as much as tenants do. You know, not every landlord in this town is, you know, making a killing. Sometimes they're renting something to hold on to it, you know, or whatever. So I think that there's, you know, both sides there, but I think that it needs to be addressed, you know, for just health and safety reasons also.
Well, to Stephanie's point, the more you increase the standard, the more the cost.
Right.
The more the cost to the landlord, the higher the rent. So what's always interesting to me is if I impose my standard of living on you, I may make it unaffordable for you, but then at the same time, I want to get the kind of person that I like better. You have to be very careful of that. Like, yes, it would be great if everyone lived in very nice apartments. Those cost more. So then you just have to weigh that out. Like, are we going to insist that everything be to a certain standard so that we're comfortable, but people are not going to be able to afford it? Or do you say, okay, you know what, we don't have the staff to do 90% of this. What if we simply focus on multifamily that have above X number, and through the building department, we say, you know, 2 inspections a year, and these are the basic things that we're going to insist on, but it's limited to these kinds of housing developments, because, I mean, I think otherwise you're just basically gentrifying to an extent. I'm gentrifying at a lower level, but it's still gentrifying. If I, as a landlord, can't afford to make the upgrades needed and continue to rent.
Yeah, I mean, I think I 98% agree with you, and then I'll throw in like the other end of the spectrum, right, is that if you have no enforcement, it does allow for the possibility that all of the benefits of the, you know, increases in the in property value go to the owner, with none of the maintenance being done. And then especially at the point of sale or transition, then who bears the cost of that dilapidation that's been allowed? So I agree that I think it's not as simple as raised to some very, very high standard that makes it so that everything becomes very expensive. So obviously, like the hardware store is the big major question, and this has come up around all of the, you know, buildings downtown, is this question of, well, if everything was up to code entirely, then would it be affordable for the businesses, which is its own like complex question about how our, you know, economy is working, and I don't feel like I know enough about it to have a super strong opinion. But I generally am, whatever, sensitive or feel like there's a point there, but there's got to be somewhere along the line where you're maintaining some minimum standards so that you're not allowing there to be really dangerous situations, and then passing that down to where we end up with a really dilapidated housing stock that the only people who benefited were the people who were the owners over that period. And then we've got to clean up the mess later as a community.
But don't I have the right as a property owner to let my house get as dilapidated as I
think
can
that's,
afford to keep it?
I
You know
think
what I
that's the
mean?
question. I think the answer is not everywhere, certainly. I mean, obviously that's where zoning and code enforcement comes in. There are certainly places that have much higher standards. And so we're trying to find the line of, on the one hand, we want people to be able to live how they want to live and not have to put too much money into their properties. And on the other hand, you're trying to not have it go so far that it's dangerous and or, you know, detrimental to the community in some way. And it's tricky.
And I think, you know, absolutely, and I've said it in other places, like, there should be room for the different categories of landlord. It's obviously very different if you have a building of rentals and you're renting out one room. Like, you should not be held to the same standard or expectations. At the same time, being a landlord is a responsibility. There's a
Right.
responsibility. I think there's ethics inherently woven into that when you've chosen to take on that role or responsibility. And currently we're not engaging with that at all. And I think there's also other ways to, I think what you described, Judy, there's other ways to do it as well, that's not just like, there's ways to like have like community kind of engagement in the process, you know? Maybe somebody is a single family and, for example, repair grants don't apply to rentals, I learned recently. So what if you have a landlord who can't afford repairs but wants to do repairs for their tenants? Like, there are other sources, but right now that's not something we're offering or making accessibility.
Yeah, and you could incentivize it based on what, so maybe we want to help the landlord that's keeping rents low, but we don't want to help the landlord that's raising rents. I mean, we have choices with the TIF and CRA processes where it's like, we can decide, do we want to incentivize? So like, I'm really hoping that some of the multifamily apartments can be renovated, but also maintain cost effectiveness, right? Well, how would you do that? Well, one of the tools we have available is we can incentivize that. We can make it much less costly by giving certain incentives. And that's where it's like, we have to choose what we want, and then we can figure out how to incentivize it on the other end.
I made mine at 5. Yeah, it's not high on my bucket list. We have more things to prioritize in the village. I think if you look at the history, Hawthorne, when it was built, it was at the top of the line. And over time, now it's the bottom of the line. If you're gonna maintain it, you gotta start at the beginning. You have other housing units or other apartments that are the same way. And normally we're complaint driven, and we have looked into this rental and code enforcement through the building department. They're willing to do it, but it costs, and you don't want that headache. And they even said, majority of the cities that have us do it literally stop us about 6 months into it because it disrupts the whole village, the whole city, because you're a good landlord, you're gonna fix your place, but for the bad landlord, they're just not gonna do it. And what are you gonna do, fine them, and then they're gonna take the fine, they're gonna pass it on to the renters are then gonna come here because their rent got raised, and they're gonna say, quit raising my rent. I've had some conversations about the hardware store with some other leaders in town, and it's kinda like, we've let it get this way, and how do we fix it? And we gotta fix it by doing little things that we can now. If that means that we get a bunch of people together and we buy a bunch of smoke detectors and we put in every building downtown because they don't have smoke detectors, to give the tenant just that little bit of time. But to make it a #1 priority, I don't think it fits in my category. Because of the fact of the affordability as well. If we're gonna make Joe over here fix up his place, his rents are now gonna go from affordable for the people living in there to not affordable. Prime example is Lawson Place. When we took over the unit, we started redoing them. We had 7 units. It was not even capable of being rented out. And the first thing we did is, if you had a renovated unit, you're paying about $150 more than the person that has been since 1960s, and it still looks the same. So when that person moves out, they get cleaned up, they get renovated, they get new appliances, and now that one's $150 more, and we have to keep on doing that. So for me, that's why I gave it a 5. Plus, it was a broad rentals. Are we talking about building more rentals? Are we talking about rental code enforcement? So it's a broad topic, and I understand why it's on there. It's a 5 to me. We have more priorities versus making that a #1.
All right. I think for me, the definition of rentals, I think I kind of stated already, was current stock, and then as one, and then moving forward. But you know, Johnny and I do get to sit in on the hot button topic of the hardware store and what's going on up there. So I don't know what that stock looks like, right? Is this just a one-off? How many units do we have like that?
36.
Yeah, and so, like, that's a big number, right? And so,
Wait, can you clarify?
36.
36 in
commercial.
the downtown businesses have
Rentals.
rentals above.
And so, you know, what we found out by looking under the hood of the property that's in discussion was not good, right? And so, I think there is a mandate of government and, you know, village, you know, leadership as well as other organizations to at minimum meet the bare requirements. And we talk about code. That's not, you know, when we, like right now we were talking about, well, we're at code.
Correct.
But code is the minimum.
Right.
Like that's the safety and wellness of the inhabitants of a building. And I think if we view housing as a right, then that's mandatory. Like we have to be up to that standard. And that's not, I don't want to say up to a standard, that's the minimum. So that's what I was looking at from a rentals perspective, is making sure that the livability of each member, of every renter is met. Number one. I guess moving on from that, it's can we set in place a set of rules and regulations or a process that for future rentals, so we don't have to do this so retroactively, that it's understood that this is the values and the infrastructure that comes with building in Yellow Springs. I do believe that if you are going to make a living or if you are going to monetize your property, that is very different than just living in your own property. And so I view that very differently. So there are some, Angie, you said it before, I think the standard does change a little bit. But I also understand, like, there are good landlords out there, right? And you don't want to mix them in with this. A lot of my friends, a lot of people who have Airbnbs or own property in town, and they do a hell of a job. And so how do we put together this tiered approach? So this is why I actually had it as number 2, because I thought it was the second or first, like, largest bucket of like question marks to get to, so.
I think there's, like when we're saying, you know, like, do you want to enforce codes and things like that? There's some out there, I think it's inconsistent when I just think of, like, something I know of, like one person who, you know, turned a portion of their home into a rental unit, renovated it, you know, all of this, like a, you know, kitchen, all of that stuff. So they had to have, the fire department had to come. And they're not allowed to lock a certain door that leads to the homeowner's part of their house, because they have to leave that unlocked now because it is considered an, you know, means of egress, an emergency exit for them.
Yeah.
But then we have, you know, downtown apartments that, you know, don't have smoke detectors, don't have, you know, and when I was a fire inspector when I was young, and there's that, you know, I don't understand why that, you know, why there's things that get addressed and don't, you know, and not picking on the fire department in any sort of way, I'm just using that as an example. Something that they're doing they're doing things one way here though, and one way another way, like there's no consistency. And I don't know if, you know, landlords are just these, you know, well-known property owners and they're just getting a pass, you know, like that's just how that building is, we just don't, you know, once you open up that can of worms kind of thing. But I think that type of thing is what needs to be grit, you know, the inconsistent. If you're doing something one way, if you're making certain this type of rental, you know, which wasn't affordable, you know, it was very nice, you know, done. If you're making sure that is up to standards, but you're still letting these go, that's, you know, just, you know, as a renter, you know, I've seen all sorts of things and not really had to put up with anything super dangerous myself, which I'm grateful for, but there's just so much of that we know it's there, you know, you can't just keep ignoring it. You know?
But I just want to make sure I clarify, there's no proactive enforcement that happens, right? Like zero?
From the village?
Yeah.
No.
Of code,
And then,
of whatever.
so do we
Right.
think, does the fire department do some kind of?
Okay,
supposed to.
okay. So I got
Good
back
timing.
up. So yesterday, I actually, after our meeting, Gina Marie and I have been talking. I actually been with the fire chief, so I feel that I can talk about this. You're correct. Is the fire department doing this? I've been here since 14. They used to do some downtown businesses inspections, but they do not currently have the staff to be able to do that. It is the fire chief's goal to have a program up and going to where buildings get inspected like once a year downtown, but he also needs help and budget and staff and, you know, and but he does have a list of projects, and one of the projects is, hey, all the commercial buildings, we like to inspect once a year and make sure that, you know, your panel's not blocked and your exits and your fire alarms and all that. And to his point, and you probably know this, the worst outcome is when you have a common hallway for multiple units. And what we have in town just did not sit well in Columbus. They had, last week had a fire in an old building, and 3 of the tenants was trying to use a common hallway and they lost their life. So the best thing that we can do is in the code, zoning, is to change it to where we don't have these common hallways. And if there is a common hallway, it's a sprinklered system, and, you know, some renters or some landlords that are redoing apartment buildings, they're putting in sprinkler systems. Not because they have to, because they don't want the liability of what happens if it goes bad. So, just to say that I did meet with the fire chief. I did ask him if there's anything that the village could do for them to help them, because I want them to inspect our building, you know, find our mistakes. Don't tell us when you're coming, find our bad habits.
Yeah.
And he said he would get back to me. I also said, hey, maybe the community foundation or some people can buy a bunch of fire alarms and CO detectors, and they could be the ones that go put them in and educate. So there is communications and talks going forward.
We're gonna wrap up. Any last thoughts?
Was there any, I just thought of this right now. Is there any thought in terms of like, I don't say fixed rate rents, but what's the term? I'm looking for the term in California. Rent control. I don't even know if that's an issue. I'm literally throwing that out there. But is this something that's been discussed in the past or currently, or if we see that as a problem? Just as we discuss affordability as the overarching umbrella during these conversations, possibly. Just throwing it out there.
And I misspoke, it's 39 units above the downtown area, not 36.
So I'm just like kind of keeping a list of, here are things that came up. If there isn't anybody jumping out saying no, then I'm assuming it's worth talking about. And so then when we get to the hour, it's like then we throw out, okay, here are the
Yeah,
things, and maybe we rank them or something
Yeah.
of interest. Okay.
yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to Glass Farm then.
Angie, I'm going to insert one thing quickly.
Yeah.
I'd have to research it, but I think the General Assembly might have prohibited municipal rent control.
I just remember when I was in California, it was the biggest.
Yeah.
If you could get in and locked in early. It was, but over here, I don't know if that's even.
No, but it's
It's
to
a
my earlier
conversation.
point, it's like an interesting thing. We don't think about that in relation to a small
Yeah.
community, but maybe it is relevant,
Yeah.
given the circumstances we're in.
You know what, to me, it shakes out in the market. If I don't have enough money to pay more than $500 a month, I rent a certain sort of an apartment. If I have money to pay more, I rent another certain sort of apartment. People, you know, scale what they're charging generally based on what they think the value of the rental is based on this place. It seems disingenuous to say, we're going to engage in rent control before we actually address the housing issue, because we just want y'all to take care of it. Because the reason I can charge a bunch of rent is that there's no damn housing, so I can get what I want from you. To an extent, right? And some people take advantage of that and some people don't. But if you impose rent control, it's sort of like, well, we're going to put the burden on you before we take care of this over here. To me, that's like, start over here, let the market shake out like it does, and then look at whether or not you need to control. that.
I think if you was trying to control the rent market, you would have an overabundance of houses for sale because your renters would then be out of a house because the owners would be selling the houses.
Yeah, that's
I'm
also.
pretty sure we're not allowed,
Yeah,
I think this
yeah, I'm
is
pretty
not,
sure it's a
yeah.
moot point. But I do think it's an interesting conversation. I think you're right. There are, what Johnny's saying is there is a reaction to every action
Action.
that we discuss though, generally speaking, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I'm gonna start the timer. I know, I was like, I didn't do that till now. Glass Farm. I know, 20 minutes on Glass Farm. I understand that's a ridiculous premise, but that is what we're gonna do now.
Can I talk about the Oxford example?
Yes, please.
So the city of Oxford, Johnny and Elise have heard me say this. The city of Oxford came into some land they owned, the city owned it. They put an RFP out for affordable housing development on it. They got 4 responses from 4 different developers and ended up working with Habitat for Humanity, who's building they broke ground last year, who's building a single-family neighborhood in the city of Oxford. So it's interesting, it's unique, it's, I don't know that I've seen anyone else in at least Southern Ohio try something like that. And they've had a lot of success with it, so, and they're, Johnny and Elise know their manager and assistant manager, and their planning director, they'd all be happy to.
I actually have it on my book, my notes, it says Oxford field trip.
Yeah. Let's
And
do
it's
it.
already under construction.
It's,
Construction.
they broke ground.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could look at their RFP if we were interested in something like that to see and learn from there, because they have thoughts. Jessica, their assistant city manager, has lots of thoughts of how they could have done things differently, what went well, what didn't go well.
Sure.
In all fairness, Habitat was the one that we brought in that people frowned on.
That people what?
Frowned on when we was talking about it the last time. Last one.
Well, and I would argue that there were maybe 1 or 2 people who had, but we did not ever systematically talk about it.
Absolutely.
So I'll just say on Glass Farm, based on the conversation we've had, I think there's a pretty wide agreement internally at council and staff on the basic framework. It's like everybody agrees there's some interest in development, and again, I understand, I'm just saying, I'm trying to
There's
keep
nuance,
broad
like,
strokes here.
Yeah.
Some housing development, trying to get as much density as possible while also maintain, so like the conservation development concepts, I think is widely of interest, not just on this parcel, but in general. It's like, how do you figure out how to get as much density as you can while also, so probably smaller lot sizes and or building up and then maintaining more green space. These questions around the, wetland stuff, obviously have come up too, so how do you, are these things, can they work together? And then it just purely seems like it comes down to a question of how many of the units can have how much affordability for how much time. And so it's, are you building smaller, square footage with, lower building costs that you can then have lower, maintenance costs? Anyway, it's just a big math problem. It's, do you want to have bigger units that have less affordability for less time? So the question's about, do you have a 5-year affordability period or the, a land trust model where it's a forever affordability period? All that just goes into, it's a series of choices about which kind of development do you want to do. I think in general, I remember at council, I feel like, and I don't think staff disagrees with this, it's like, you want as much affordability as you can get for as long as you can get it, while also finding someone who will actually build the thing. And so if you don't provide the math has to be good enough for somebody to want to build it, and so you're just trying to figure out where is that sweet spot. So I assume that's what they were doing with their RFP in Oxford without knowing anything about it, is basically saying, here's the parameters we're hoping to get, and then seeing who would get closest to the best parameters they wanted.
They did, the one thing that they didn't do is they didn't lock in the affordability piece. It expires after 10 or 15 years.
Well, it's a habitat It's the habitat model.
And that's the
So-
big flag with Habitat, right? Is
Yep.
that- And everybody gets this, that basic idea of if you put all of your subsidy into the build, and
Yeah.
then somebody who has a lower income can purchase on the front end, awesome. But there are plenty of models where there's no model, no affordability component. So then in 3 years, they sell the place and essentially all the equity goes to them. And then there's a bunch of steps in between. There's 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, there's, land, property value. There's a bunch of different metrics you could put into it. And that has to do with, what the outcomes you want are.
I kind of like that idea of being able to increase your equity by some amount, because permanently affordable means you're keeping me poor. I have a place to live, but you are not letting me build equity. Over here is, I'm getting a place to live and I'm able to build equity. If that equity is limited to some extent, then you keep it reasonably affordable. But, I like that there are different models, because one sort of relies on people, we want you to, everybody stays here.
Yeah, the habitat model is interesting because people do end up then as homeowners, so.
They also have an education part of it, but that's a later day. I'll try to set up a tour.
Yeah, I
for-
want, yeah.
But from
Yeah, let's do it.
from a structural standpoint, if, let's say you did, 500 units of affordable housing, and they were all 15-year period, in the same way that zoning works in this incremental way, it won't be on year 15 that you're gonna have no affordable housing left, but over time, the market will prevail. And so somebody who got a house for $200,000 that costs $350,000 to build, that equity will be theirs at some point. And so it's like, and this is obviously, this was a big conversation with Josue. Josue wanted, he would say he did not want to he didn't like the land trust model because people were not able to earn their equity. And I think, I would argue that either side is, if you just look at it as totally black and white, you're missing some of the equation. But we have choices we have to make about how many affordable units do we want long-term.
I'm curious when it comes to the comp plan on Glass Farm, what everyone's thoughts are on the suggestion around engaging the Dayton Home Builders Association about an informal roundtable discussion. Talking with local builders and developers. Because of course with the terrain of that site, it's gonna take, specifics on building, and just curious to hear everyone's thoughts on if we think that that's worth doing.
Sounds worth doing.
It sounds like a
Yeah,
step that
just
we-
all part of the learning. I guess I'm always just like wondering, I know there's so much history on this site, so it's like, what has been done? Like, was that something that was done before and hence that's here? And I think one of my questions was, we already saw at the last council meeting, the wetlands aspect of it and the conservation aspect of it, and so it's like, I think what I've learned from my short time on council is like, how do we engage with these concerns right now? We're at the very beginning of our process with this group. How do we bring in the concerns that are legitimate, valid, and existing, and carry, a background of their own? What's the right format to enter into this? And how do we weigh that with the reality that, yes, there are people whose preference is that it's not developed.
I think Glass Farm, I know, I probably bring up like talking to the public a lot, but I think that Glass Farm is an issue where like a town hall type of thing is pretty warranted on something like that, at least to, where we, temperature check ourselves, we need to do that with the community. Because I think it's it could become, a very, and it is in some ways already a divisive topic.
Yeah.
But I think it could get out of control if we don't keep people, you know what I mean, where we're holding hands the whole time
Yeah.
walking through it, so.
I want to throw out that I think a town hall is, yeah, could be good. I think we should think about whether or not to use polling, like actual, like polling, not like a survey that everybody can click it 10 times, like a poll, like a actual firm that calls around to everyone, with using statistical, like modeling to try to find a representative sample. Just to say, like, I think part of what we're struggling with town halls is that you get a really disproportionate, it's hard to know, like, is that representative? And most of us are sort of, oh, okay, they're always here, but there's this quiet, da-da-da. So there's a way to do that, is like use an actual polling firm to ask everybody a series of thoughtful questions that give you some more direction. And it could be a both and. I'm not saying you wouldn't do
Yeah.
a town hall too, but
And I agree with Stephanie, it's like, I was here in 21, so
Okay.
I got to hear that saying, because every time there's a little bit of headway towards Glass Farm, the people start coming out. I don't know, I'm trying to get the document that she read from, because I don't have it, because it's a legit concern. I'd hate to keep going down this road, and all of a sudden, it's
Yeah.
like somebody standing there saying, I've been telling you guys. So if, I don't know, I asked Judy if the document was sent to her, or it wasn't, so I will try to.
Which thing are you
The
talking about?
wetland document,
Yeah, but also a couple of things have happened since then. One is that you stopped the leak that was coming off of Dayton Street.
Oh, I know.
Thousands and thousands
Yeah,
of gallons a day.
286,000
That added to
gallons.
the fact that it was
Yes.
wetland, just saying. Also,
it kept on, the pond kept on growing for some reason, we
Yeah.
figured it out.
Create your own wetlands.
also it's been tiled. Also, there was a soil study done
Correct.
that said, okay, here's the kind of development that can happen in this part, this part, this part. So those documents exist, and the fight about whether or not that was a wetland was more personal than factual, in my opinion. So, us having a soil study done tells you more than is it or isn't it a wetland based on how many geese and cattails there are. I mean, it's the soil that tells you whether or not you can.
I
And
can
then-
tell you from the solar field, they literally drove that through 4 foot of limestone, 3 feet under the ground. So when Springs Meadow decided they was gonna build basements, I was laughing. They went down 29 feet, they never hit a bit of limestone. And I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Just across the fence was limestone, so you're correct, it's a soil thing. But I just wanna make sure that we also don't just throw it out and say, hey, we know, we need to document.
okay, so while we're doing kind of like the Home Builders Association question, I have another kind of like temperature check question related to this, which comes up on several of the topics, which is around social housing. So,
Like a frat house?
like frat house, yeah. So like, to what degree is there appetite or interest in us being a builder and/or being a manager? So, we do this with our utilities, we do this, it is a thing that is happening. So part of the dynamic that is very real is that you sit down with the Home Builders Association, they're all doing one basic math problem, which is, how much money can I make? Right? I mean, and I don't mean that, that's the business they're in. It's a different, we're doing a different thing with all of our services. We're trying to figure out how do we provide the best service possible within a cost framework that makes sense for the residents of the place, right? So anyway, I don't see it as, I am open to the idea that we would think about how do we build a building, like an actual building department. Like that we would think about, because we could cut out the profit component of this. And it would be, every dollar you cut out becomes a dollar that you can subsidize effectively more affordable housing. That is the functional reality of what happens. So it's a choice that people have made in many ways. It's very common in other parts of the world. It has been common in other parts in this country and in the past. It's not as common anymore, but these issues are being struggled with everywhere, and so people are starting to talk about it more. So I'm interested in whether people are interested in talking about that, or are we just assuming, hey, we're gonna be working with a developer. To me, I'm interested in trying to cut out the profit margin. That seems intriguing to me, but I understand it comes with challenges.
I feel like there are developers out there that would look at this and, I don't feel like every developer is greedy,
I'm not talking about greedy. I'm just talking about
Well,
profit.
trying to make huge profits though, yeah.
And the line is just any profits.
Maybe I'm just optimistic that way, but I just feel like that if we, marketed this, whatever project, and sought out contractors for that, that we're just willing to be those, people, I don't think we should rule out that there aren't people like, contractors like that.
But isn't
Totally.
that in part like the strength of Habitat for Humanity? You have, they build, they're a nonprofit, their main goal is not to make profit. It doesn't address the affordability down the line issue, but they've figured out a way to do that piece of it. So, I mean, I do think it's like an interesting idea, and also like Johnny, when we talked about Lawson, and right now when you talk about Lawson, part of me is just like, it's a great program, and it sounds like you need more support, and that it was a hard learning curve to get to where we are, but for me, there's still a question, which is why it's here on the board, of like, we could do more of that. We know that there are other rentals where we could do that, and imagine if there was more staff support and resources and budget line for that, to be the landlord, especially, like, more or less. So, I think, I'm with you, like, I think that option exists, we should seek it out, but we should also think about, like, the non-traditional. And especially because of the knowledge that we have in our village. Like, we were able to become a landlord because you had all these departments that had those skills and resources.
That's my thought with you saying that it was just a lot for staff, that you didn't hire more staff. Well, that just feels like a department that doesn't exist, so.
It's definitely a department that doesn't exist, yeah.
Absolutely.
But I wanna hear your response to Gavin's prompt. I'm interested.
I understand where Gavin's trying to save money and all that, but to do what you're thinking about doing for 23 acres is not doable. If you had 2,000 acres and you could build your own team and you could have your own construction, because you have multiple areas to develop and we're gonna tackle this, it would make sense. But to do just for the glass farm, you would lose money just by starting the project, because of the fact that after the project's done, what are you doing? You're not doing anything.
But are you thinking about, and I guess I'm looking at it like a whole spectrum, from just being the developer, but hiring general contractors, that's a set of savings, right?
Correct.
If you're the developer and the general contractor, that could be a whole different thing. If you're the developer and the general contractor and the manager, so there's a spectrum here.
There is spectrum.
Where it's like, and I think that's what I'm trying to get a sense of is, I think I hear you, that the idea of standing up a whole, that we're gonna build the entire thing.
Correct.
We do have a lot more than 23 acres, right? I mean, we have plenty of other places we could conceivably build projects. If we, we got the property.
Yeah.
You could have, so I'm just trying to figure out the range of, like, do you, like, when you respond, are you saying, I don't really like the idea of us going down the road of even being a developer?
No.
Or is it like,
No, not at all.
I don't like the contractor part, but the developer part could make sense, you know what I mean?
No, why, yeah, I mean, if you're thinking of like literally they're gonna hire the drywall guy and things like that, I mean, I'm not an expert on that, but I am optimistic, envision something more in the middle of that, that you find, the contractors that do things, you know, that aren't, you know, yeah, they're not trying to, you know, something not like Windsor, you know, but that's what they're just in it for profit, and that's what they do, whether they do it well or not. But someone that just has a bit of a different type of ethics, and whether you break that down, you know, and the village is the general contractor, you know, I'm not.
Yeah.
Let me, I think, were you itching to get to the next subject? Since
No,
okay,
but I'm giving we are time, so let's do
Okay,
the couple
my 2
minutes.
cents. All right, so Glass Farm was one on mine. Mostly for the reason that I think it's the only, not the only one, but one of the ones up there that I think is, you know, kill multiple birds with one stone on this. It's providing opportunities, it's opportunities for displaced people who can't afford to live in town. It's also attracting, I think it sends the right signal if it's a mixed use of what Village Values Yellow Springs stands for. Going into what you were saying about looking into more creative ways of development, I also thought that Glass Farm gave this particular village council and leadership, if we were coming, because this is month 3, and we're doing it very soon, that if we went with clear intention on this place, that this would be one of the first times that proactively we are going at this, not aspirational, but in trying to be effective in getting something done. And that's why I think that one, as much as I'm for it, is that causing a roadblock to develop? Because I think what people want to see is that verticality. They want to see something get done. And Glass Farm, I think, is our not only option, but it's our biggest option to getting something done, our biggest opportunity. And if we can do it in other ways, fantastic. But I think it also gives us the opportunity to hear from the community, like everybody's been saying. I don't want to use NIMBYism as the word, but this is kind of the time where we stand up and say, is this really what we are about, like the Glass Farm? And if we hear, you know, unanimously no, then I think there's a much larger village issue that we have to address here, besides just development and affordability. But, you know, I look at it again through the lens of economic development, not with the specifics of the nuances of housing, you know, habitat and things of that nature. So when I looked at it, it was, we have this plot of land. I know the way these developers think. And if we go in with a clear set of priorities or the lens that we talked about before, defining housing, as well as understanding that we're not going to change village codes and lose leverage, that this is the moment, right? Like this is the actual opportunity. So that's kind of where I stand. And I also want to be frank, like, I don't think we can be everything. I don't think Glass Farm can be everything. And so the idea that there might be some cap on equity is okay, because this is still a affordable or low income development that we're trying to provide opportunities as stepping stones, right? And then maybe there's single family homes, maybe there's rentals around it. And so I don't want to get too far. I want to make sure obviously we're doing it the right way, you have to. But I do think that this is kind of like that beacon that we've been trying, and the earlier we can get this out in the community conversations, I think we send a message, and we will hopefully get some of this feedback. So that's kind of where I stand.
Final thought?
No, I want to go back to what Gavin's saying. What I'm against is we're hanging drywall, we're putting studs up. As far as, to go back to Angie's point, yeah, the lost some places where it is because we had staff members that knew the right people to call, the right contractors. The staff never did any work inside the building because we don't have a maintenance department. My God, I wish I had a maintenance department because they'd be able to help us out at the library and buildings and stuff like that. But we rely on contractors because our staff is doing water and sewers and streets. And I mean, we don't have a mechanic, so we got to ship all that out. So I'm against the hammer, nails, and drywall and concrete, but I am for the upper end of it, that if we had the ability to project manage or do better. So I'm with you on
And there's a bunch of other steps in between. I think I really agree with your basic framing and that there are some choices. Like I could pretty easily come off of some of the like further down the roads, you know, social housing
Yeah.
side of things in order to go fast.
Yeah.
And, you know, so there's some choices there. We could also have incentives for local contractors, we could have incentives for nonprofit developers and/or, you know, and so it's like there are, you know, in the RFP scoring, you know, we could make some choices about what we're incentivizing.
Agreed.
Beyond just, like, I would feel very differently about a local contractor that we feel confident is going to use those dollars in this community than using somebody external. You know, those are, anyway, there are a range of choices, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And again, where I was going before is because we own this plot of land and because we have so much historical data and understanding now, this is a unique position as far as even leverage in a negotiation and
Yeah.
understanding that it makes it, I think, more feasible than years past, so, yeah.
Great.
And an RFP is your key, very most
Yeah.
key feature, and it should definitely be mixed
Yep.
income. And also, this is the time, because you've got a village manager who really knows how to oversee a major project and cut costs and see when you're getting screwed. I mean, that's not typical, you know, so it's not. You usually don't have someone in that capacity who's able to go, hold it a minute, we don't need a transformer that huge. And we have that.
Okay, well done, guys. Okay, we have about 20 minutes left, so we're gonna spend that on zoning before we break for WISO. Who wants to? Amy?
Let me kick off zoning, because I'm gonna jump on my horse again.
Yeah.
When you talk about doing zoning changes, everybody wants to make it to where it's great. And you talked about the high rise that's in Chicago because they could, right? When we do zoning changes, understand, we also have to do infrastructure changes because what it was originally zoned for is the infrastructure that is there. So if you're talking about allowing 3- and 4-story buildings and, you know, name it, I don't want to name a neighborhood, understanding that if somebody comes to do that, we got a lot of infrastructure around that area to improve, to accommodate for said changes. So understand zoning changes also equals infrastructure changes, road changes, sidewalk changes, all that. So that is all now get off my horse. Amy?
That's what I was gonna say,
Oh, okay.
actually.
Oh, took that from me.
Yeah, because I mean, we did go through that quite extensively with the zoning changes a couple years ago. The consideration that it sounds great in theory, but you take your single family home and change it into a duplex by right, but people wanna be able to flush their toilets, so.
And you've also given a go-ahead to a developer to say, well, this is now permitted by right, which means now we have to provide the infrastructure. We've already told you you're gonna be able to flush your toilets, so now it's on us, as opposed to a developer coming in and saying, I wanna do this thing, and the village being able to say, well, if you wanna do that thing, here's what you're gonna have to do for our infrastructure first. And if we've already changed the code, we don't have leverage.
I mean, yes and no. That's not quite that black and white. But-
So, I think there's been pretty wide, I mean, I think folks acknowledge that this is a dynamic. For me, the one that comes up the most on zoning is, I think, the questions around like inclusionary zoning and whether or not there should be, and this gets into the CRA and TIF stuff and the scoring, is like, do you want to in any way require, any affordability component? You know, we sort of worked through that as part of the Windsor deal, but it's not baked in, right? So that, I don't know, I think it's like, it feels a little bit, and it does feel like we've gone on this level where it's like, do we need any more, do we want any more market rate, single family houses? And if we don't, then we should change the zoning in order to, because right now, we're still in like, people can bring us projects and we have to do them. And so there's like, we want to change what we're doing, we got to change the zoning so that we get the outcomes that we want. So I think there's a particular question around inclusionary zoning, and then there's a question around how do we want to incentivize single-family homes. I feel like those are the two biggest questions that have come up.
Is there land in the village for development that isn't the glass farm that could be a single-family subdivision?
Corner President and Corey. Those are the two. And my
Where the
point
farm
is,
is? Where the farm, where the community farm is? Is that the?
where the community garden is.
Yeah, that area.
Isn't some of that,
Conservation.
Where?
yeah.
Own it.
Are you asking about the
Isn't
property
some of
we
that-
own or anywhere?
We own that one, I believe, don't we?
Is that-
Yeah.
The community garden.
My understanding, yeah, is that some of that property can't be developed.
No.
There is a main sewer line there, and there's two main sewer lines there. One cannot be rerouted, the other one can be. So I'll go back to Gavin, I go back to, if you're going to do inclusionary zoning on the property that we own, I think that's by far our best option, right?
Glass farm, you're saying?
Glass farm, anything that the village owns, if we
Yeah,
decide to
agreed.
develop it or whatever, we have that right. When you talk about what we've done over the last 12 years to bring people into the village, to want to build in the village and all that, and then you put a clause on there, you're closing the door of everything that we've made easier for people to want to come and do development.
I know that, and I guess that's the thing I'm not sure there's agreement upon.
Right.
Is do we want to leave, and it's just a legitimate, it's a question. Do we want to allow and encourage development? I think that's the core question. Yeah, I understand, that's the choice, is like, do we want to allow development more? In which case, don't limit it. But then you get to a point where you're crossing over where you're building more single family, you're doing less rental. I think you're continuing the trend of older, richer, whiter. And so how do you put a curb on that? I would like to at least talk about it enough to have some conscientiousness of it. And I'm trying to get a sense of, is that, what do other people think?
For sure, yeah. Yeah, I think that needs to be, I don't know the language, but we capped, controlled, something, so that we don't end up with just more housing that isn't what our goal is here, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, that's the natural trajectory of what's gonna happen unless we engage.
Yeah, I feel like the purpose of this whole day is to try to, at least for me, is to try to rein
And-
something like that, this trajectory that we're on, is to try to take control of some of that.
And to say, these things are like, they're not completely like, in tension. So some of the people who have advocated the most strongly for zoning reform, what they're basically saying is build, 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 so that there is more of a housing stock, so that there is more affordability,
Yeah.
right? So it's sort of a question, it's like a philosophy of, do we want to encourage people to come here and build so that there's more stock, so that there's more affordability? It's sort of a theory that we haven't really ever talked about openly. It's definitely a theory that is driving a lot of zoning rules all around the country. I think it's a question about whether that applies to a place of this size.
Right,
Yeah.
and to just make it super clear, it's also a theory that comes with unintended consequences. So infrastructure, I'm hearing, is a big one, like what you described with Ann Arbor, so, I think for me, when I think about that also, it's like, how long will it take for the prices to come down because of that theory, right? It might take 30 years or
Yeah.
50 years of increased buildings or increased supply for costs to come down, but it's not guaranteed. And
Well, it's a quote our last zoning administrator who said, apartments, apartments, apartments. And then Carmen has said apartments, apartments, apartments. I mean, that's how you address this issue and this issue without taking up a lot of land and space and build, if it is thoughtfully done. And that's the thing we really don't have enough of. We don't have a lot of apartments at all. And that gets people here a lot quicker and more affordably. It's just it's sort of how you go about the whole thing.
So how do you do that with zoning? Like,
Yeah,
how do
I'm
you
thinking-
encourage apartments?
Well, I think on village-owned land, because apartments aren't moneymakers, generally speaking. So I think a good thing to do is to say, you know what, we want a work session with, once this planning and zoning person comes in the door and gets a little settled, not a year from now, but like, give them a month, they know this is a priority, and sit down and say, these are high priority things we want to be able to accomplish. Do we need to change the code to get them? Are there things we can do to get them? Because what's annoying, I think well, it is annoying to me, but from the staff side is you better change that code right now, we want this thing. Instead of saying, here are the things we want. How do we get them? How can you get us there, given what our code is? Do we need to change things? What can we do? And then letting that person go, okay, here's some methods by which, and you consider them and decide what you want, but here are the 10 ways you can get there and the 2 ways you can get there. We haven't done that before. It's been driven from the outside in. It's very reactive, and I think it's far less productive than just saying, we've decided what we want. You tell us how we get there.
And speaking of unintended consequences, this predates me, so this is a question for Judy and Johnny. Didn't we have an expert come in and talk about inclusionary zoning at one point in time, and that person's conclusion was that we would sort of be shooting ourselves in the foot a bit with it?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on
Well, wasn't it Mary Ann?
No.
There was another person who came?
No, she did a ton of research. They did a lot of research, and they reached out to a number of folks about inclusionary zoning. And they gave me the same response back, which was, you're way the hell too small to think about
Well,
inclusionary zoning.
that's the thing. And
Size.
so it's hard when you say, like, how can you change zoning to motivate or, encourage
Incentivize.
housing development? You don't have that much land. There's not that much that you can do with your zoning code. When you see, all of these communities around the state that are using their zoning code in an attempt to allow for more development, they're much larger.
Yeah.
They're more annexation friendly. They're, doing, they have other options open to them that we don't have because we're just smaller.
Yeah,
So.
but it's why it's so hard, we talked about this, it's so hard to watch hundreds of units go in and we have so little land and we had no affordability component. It's like, so I understand, on the one hand, yes, we're so small. On the other hand, yeah, we're so small, we should definitely have some mix because then we're gonna end up with even less mixed income communities.
Then we should have bought that land.
Or change the zoning related to it, I'm just saying.
Well, we
Or
changed-
not change the
we
zoning
changed-
related to it when,
We changed the zoning for the developer. We didn't have that zoning in place. That zoning was E1, EI, whatever that zoning.
no, that's Windsor you're talking about.
Yeah, I am talking about Windsor.
But they're talking about Spring Meadows, right?
Windsor.
No, I thought we were talking about Spring.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Windsor. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we're saying before.
Are we talking about Spring Meadows?
Before planning
Yeah.
commission said change everything annexed in
Right.
automatically as, used to automatically annex in as RA.
RA.
They're like, no, we want more density, so automatically RC. Previously, the village would have been able to say, well, if you guys want that, here's what you're gonna have to do for us, which we did with Oberer. And
Right.
we did get mixed use and a chunk set aside for affordable housing. And council said no. But per the zoning code and per planning commission, that was all teed up. So that's why I say infighting, that was nothing. The village had that set, ready to go. Planning commission handed it to council. Council said no. So,
Well, none of us were here then.
No, absolutely, but I'm
Carmen
just
was
saying,
at the
all
end,
the
but she's not
components
here
have to
today, but
line
None of
up.
us were here, so I understand that was but that's the dynamic is, do you want to, you can create some rules,
Hmm?
and maybe we went in a direction that was too far in one way. And the thing I always think about is I think it's the Pence property, that's the big farm that's like across the street from the. Was that? Behind the water tower, across from Village Automotive, et cetera, is like, that, we don't have that many big parcels left that are sort of in the like clear, distinctive Yellow Springs
Urban service boundary.
urban service boundary. And so just always trying to think like, what if that became X? And how do you create the framework so that a big high profile change would happen in the way that we want it to?
Is that land already in the village?
Yeah.
What's it zoned, does anyone know?
Probably, whatever farmland is.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to pick on, I'm just trying to like,
No, I
just
know
so
what
you
you
have a
mean.
sense of like,
And
looking
so then-
backwards is one thing, but then it's also like looking forward of,
Yeah.
okay, how do we make sure that the next development is like, oh, we all felt really good about that one in the way that it feels like we have more control on Glass Farm, but we do actually have control over other developments too with our zoning. So I think it's a both. I'm not saying it's either or, it's
So
both.
incentives is a huge way
Yeah.
to do this, right? To motivate developers with incentives to do what it is that you want them to do. Bear in mind that that property owners have rights in their land, right? And there are standards that have to be applied for rezones that isn't just what council wants to do on the land, right? There are property owner considerations there as well. So, changing things like what land comes in that's annexed, what it's zoned as once it comes in, that's a little bit different than property that's already, that a property owner might be coming to the village and seeking a rezone. So the best course in a situation like that would be that a developer, I think, wants to find their way to a PUD, because then the PUD is gonna give them the most density, and the PUD code dances around affordable right now. It could say it much more strongly, use it much more strongly. Right now, under the PUD code, you can develop a residential PUD, and you have to have, if you, there's a list, you check off certain things on the list, you can get a higher amount of density. One of the things on that list is affordability. So if you could restructure the way your PUD code is drafted and make affordability tied to, affordability tied to higher density strictly, right? If you want to develop this level of density, you have to provide this level of affordability. That would be one mechanism. Pair that with incentives and maybe you get somewhere.
Gavin, just for clarification, the Pitts Farm and the Jones Farm are in the urban service boundary, but they are not in the village.
Oh, okay.
They would have to be annexed in.
Okay.
Same way with the Clem Farm across the street from Springs Meadow 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
That's also in the urban service boundary, but it would have to be annexed in.
Okay.
Yeah, to Amy's point, there's not a lot, it's
Yeah.
small.
You're relatively
Even what we
limited.
think, what we see and think is part of the village often isn't.
And I've never seen a community say, if somebody wants to develop their land, thou shall not develop half-acre lots with $1 million homes, right? I've never seen a community do that. I don't know that that's necessarily something that couldn't be pursued, right? If we want to draft a change to the zoning code in such a way to circumvent that type of development, that's certainly something we could look at. Because again, as of now, when people come seeking a rezone to whatever district they want to rezone to that might be residential, it's going to include the opportunity for those single-family home, large lot developments.
And like every one of these things can be sort of ratcheted up or ratcheted down. I think what, when we talk about inclusionary zoning, I think it becomes a thing of like, oh my God, we're going to stop everything. Well, we just had a developer that agreed to effectively 15%, 10% inclusionary zoning provision as part of, and that they apparently feel like apartments make enough money that they're going to do a big development. Knock on wood that they keep going with.
Yeah, right.
But, so I just want to be clear that like, when I'm saying like, hey, should we talk about inclusionary zoning? It's not like, let's make us 75%, of your units have to be affordable to people making 40% of AMI. That would shut down all development at scale, right? But could you have something? I think there was, and doesn't mean there's anything wrong with, like, the Spring Meadows project has a lot of benefits. I think there's just a moment where you're like, wait a minute, we only have so much land, and we're clearly going past the need from the Bowen study that was the only sort of data reference point we had. So at some point, we should stop this, right? Like, we should have some mix to get toward the mix we want as a community
So then let's course
that we
correct.
haven't defined.
Based on Windsor. Let's course correct based on Windsor. The fact that they were able to pursue that PUD under the code and get the approvals that they got without being required to have certain thresholds of affordability can be tweaked.
Yeah.
We can tweak that in our code very easily. Could it potentially deter future development? Maybe. I mean, I don't know that that really would.
Well, and part of the dynamic, right, y'all understand, is that the affordability requirements on
Yeah.
Windsor they're high enough that they probably aren't changing their pro forma, like their math problem at all, right? So that's part of the dynamic, is that anyway, we get the ideas here. I think we need to set some goals of what we want to see happen in the community, and then that way we can work backward from the kinds of policies and kinds of incentives that we try to develop. That's what it ultimately comes down to.
I think we go back to, Judy, when you said this is the first council that is locked in, right? Because I hear the Bowen study, and then I hear the comprehensive land study, and clearly, both of those did not align, because now what you have is the development of the comprehensive land use plan, which is Springs Meadow 1 through 4, mirrors our comprehensive land use plan on purpose, because they looked at our plan as like, oh yeah, we can build that, we did it. And now we're like, oh my God, it's too much. We didn't want all them houses. Well, you did, because in the comprehensive land use plans, you said you wanted that. But in the Boeing study, we said, no, we didn't want that, or we didn't need that. And the comprehensive land use plan and the Boeing study must not align.
Well, or
with
there's
the
enough room
village.
for interpretation. Because I know,
Correct.
the guy from the pushback on Spring Meadows, but he'll go, the comprehensive plan, and it really is, it's like, there's room for interpretation.
No, I mean,
You read the
yeah,
words,
yeah,
and
it's here.
one way you frame it might
Yeah.
be, it's exactly what it is, and I can completely see how somebody would read it and go, this is doesn't meet the and it's because you weight and prioritize things differently. So
Which is-
that's a learning for us, is like, we gotta get more targeted and specific in our language.
Yeah. Okay,
If not.
we did it.
Yeah.
Oh, did we fix it?
We fixed it.
We're done.
11:20. Okay, so we will all be back at 1 o'clock.
Is
I
anybody
see there's
driving?
lunch.
Who's carpool? You driving? You're walking.
There ain't gonna be a spot anywhere near that problem.
It's like 2 blocks out.
So now who wants a ride?
But it looks very festive out front.
I want to walk to drive.
My legs are shorter than yours and I can walk, so.
Hey, Angie, before I just want to ask you something.
Yeah.
before you